This is the best and worst of the Lumix S1ii. All right, so this is coming solely from a video only perspective. I've been able to use the S1ii on some corporate shoots, interviews and B-roll, that type of thing. Especially the dreaded conference room interviews. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about when it comes to that. I've also been able to use it in a little bit more of a controlled environment here at the studio in the video lab. A little disclaimer, Lumix did provide the S1ii sample. However, these thoughts and opinions in this video and about this camera are completely my own. With that being said, the S1ii is my favorite Lumix camera since the GH5. In this video, I'm just going to walk you through the best and the worst of the S1ii after using it on these different corporate shoots. And I got to start with this. I have to start with this as the best so far with this camera. The dynamic range is noticeable with this camera. I've just noticed so much more detail, especially in the highlights when it comes to some of these shots. A lot of times in some of these interviews, the highlights might be blown out a little bit, or maybe you have a background window and you need to kind of capture some of that. I've noticed with the S1ii that those highlights and the dynamic range, especially in the highlights, is noticeably different than a lot of other Lumix cameras. It also has a dynamic range boost mode that you can toggle on and off. Now, it is great without the boost mode at about, I think 12 to 13 stops of dynamic range. Turn that on, you get an extra 2 to 3 stops of dynamic range. However, when you do that, that is going to change the next thing that I consider one of the best features of the Lumix S1ii is just the dual native ISO. These dual ISO frequencies are very easy to work with. You have a Vlog base low frequency of ISO 640 and then a high frequency of ISO 5000. And this is not a comparison video to the S1R. If you want to see my best and worst of the S1R, which I'm using right now, make sure you check out this video that's popping up right here. But the S1R2 has a base ISO low frequency of 200 and a high frequency of 1000 ISO. So on the S1ii, you should get better low light performance with that high frequency of 5000. And the base of like what we are used to on the S5 IIX of 640, but that one maxes out at the high frequency of 2000. So you should overall have better low light performance with the S1ii at that high frequency of 5000, which for a lot of you, especially in maybe, the wedding space or concert space or event space, you might be battling low light. So the S1ii with that high frequency of 5000 is a great feature, especially for video shooters. Now, this is on a lot of people's best list, but the 5.1K OpenGate at 60p is fantastic. Now, a lot of what I do is hand off files to, the company's editors, or they might have remote editors, something like that. But I hand off a lot of files and I shoot a lot in OpenGate. And one of the things that I was missing was just that slow motion capabilities that I was able to hand off to those editors. So finally, with the S1ii, we have an OpenGate option at 60p. So if you're shooting corporate, a lot of times you want to get social media cuts. Shooting in OpenGate is a fantastic feature and option, and we've had it at 24p and 30p, but now on the S1ii at 60p, we now have some slow motion capabilities that we can hand off to those editors, or obviously if you're doing the editing, you have that as well. But then we have to talk about one of my favorite features on the S1ii is the Cinemascope. The Cinemascope feature is at a 2:1 ratio, and it really actually feels like you're filming a movie right into your camera. You don't have to go and do the crop bars or anything like that. You have that aspect ratio built into the camera. And one of my favorite ways to use it is at 120p. Now, I have not used this feature on client work, so let me just say that real quick. Another best feature of the S1ii is the built-in false color. Now, false color was first introduced on the S1R2, but I put it on this list as well because what this tells me is that they're going to continue, Lumix is going to continue to put false color in these future cameras. But also, will this lead to a cinema camera? Having these features, having a feature like false color built into your camera, is that going to lead to a future cinema camera? I sure hope so, because one of the things that is on my worst list, and if you watch some of my other videos, you know, but from a user perspective, using the S1 II in a professional setting for corporate clients, I don't think Lumix needs to cram all of these features in the smallest camera body possible. I think it's fine to have a little bit bigger of a body style, kind of like the GH7 body style, or just totally get rid of the hybrid body altogether and put it in a cinema camera style. Now, I know that I've beat this thing to death and you know my thoughts on it, but I also understand that not everyone is using it for corporate work, you know, and that's totally fine. A lot of people are using it more as a hybrid style camera. And from that perspective, I totally understand it. From a video first perspective, I'd be fine with a bigger camera body style or a cinema camera body style. The next thing that is on my worst list, and once again, the color output just seems to be a bit different than some of the other Lumix cameras. I don't think any of the Lumix cameras that I use match from a color perspective. I feel like the S1R2 leans a little bit more magenta. The S1 II maybe leans a little bit more green. So if you're, if you have an A cam, B cam with these two cameras, you have to color match them. They're not the same color coming out of camera, all shooting in the same color light at 5600K. And yes, I totally know that I can do things to color match them. I can even adjust some of the colors in camera, but I don't understand why every single different camera is a different color perspective. This has been driving me crazy with Lumix cameras for a long time, and it's no different with the S1 II. However, with that being said, the Lumix S1 II has my favorite image so far on a Lumix camera up until this point. Now, I really can't speak much into the overheating issues because I have not used this camera in a scenario that really would warrant any type of overheating. Now, I have had on interviews this camera running for 20, 25, 30 minutes at a time, and I have not gotten any overheating issues. But I do know some people, and it's, on the internet as well, that people have been having overheating issues in certain, recording situations. But I personally have not run any overheating tests. There's plenty of those out there that you can check out. And I have not had it overheat on any of the type of recordings that I've been doing. But check some of those out. You might want to take that into consideration depending on the type of videos you're making. This is the best and worst of the Lumix S1 II. Click on this video if you want a better overview of this camera, and I will see you over there.